Hi, friends. Welcome back to the School of Self-Worth. I am your host, Nicole Song. Today is such a fun and rich topic and conversation. I am super excited to welcome Brooke Miller to the podcast. Brooke is a nutritionist and lactation consultant who supports moms postpartum to get back to their healthiest weight and to feel like themselves mentally and physically again. I have spent a lot of time myself with Brooke. I really love what she teaches and how she shares. And her own journey as a mother is really powerful. And I'm so excited for her to be here because she shares some really essential information that most moms are not doing postpartum. So you don't want to miss what she has to share if that is you. And even if you are a mom who's been through this journey, I promise you're going to learn something about what you went through from her. So get ready for this super enlightening conversation. And if you are an Asian American woman leader who wants the exact step by step to understand the secret language of intuition, I've got a private podcast that gives you a complete behind the scenes on how to master intuitive communication patterns. DM me secret at Nicole Song on Instagram to get all of the details. Okay, let's do this. Let's dig into this conversation. Welcome to the School of Self-Worth. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So Brooke and I know each other from a entrepreneur group that we're in together, and we had an awesome time together in LA just a few weeks ago talking about all things entrepreneurship. And then I also just really love what you share and what you do in the world. So I'm so excited to share more with our women who are listening.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So can you just share a little bit with people about your backstory? Like, I'd love to hear even just how you arrived to the place where you do what you do. And if you could
Mhm.
share about that part of it.
Yeah, so initially I became a dietitian because I got diagnosed with celiac disease. And so I thought that I wanted to specialize in gut and GI and quickly made it through my internship and realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I just knew at my core I wanted to help women feel better physically and mentally, but I didn't know how to go about it. And so I got my very first job as a pregnancy postpartum dietitian, and I became the lactation counselor and breastfeeding specialist. And so I started really falling into that realm and teaching classes and all of that. And I realized, oh my gosh, postpartum moms and pregnant moms, like they need so much support because there's so much emphasis on moms and like what they're eating and how they're taking care of themselves when they're pregnant because it's directly impacting their baby. And then once the baby is here, everyone is so focused on how's the baby sleeping? How's the baby doing? And I just saw this insane gap for postpartum moms who were not only physically struggling because, you know, your body has just changed so much, but also mentally struggling with how their life has changed, how their hormones are changing, how their metabolism has changed, how their body has changed, and, you know, dealing with things like exhaustion. And so I started to really, you know, see how this gap was in our society, and I didn't really understand it fully until I became a mom for the very first time and I lived it out. And that was the moment that I was like, yeah, we need some sort of support. Like moms need support in this realm. And when I was going through my own postpartum journey with my first son, I was really struggling, and the one thing that I forced myself to do consistently was to nourish myself consistently. And I was like, my son is eating every 3 hours. I deserve to eat. I deserve to rest. I deserve all of the things that I'm providing for him. And once I started doing that, my postpartum experience got drastically easier. And I realized, like, when I take care of myself as a mom, it's not selfish at all. I'm actually showing up better for my husband, for my son, for my coworkers, for those around me. And I was a nicer person. I was a happier person. And so I really realized, especially that first year postpartum, that it is not selfish to take care of your health. And even like I had a massive breakdown about 3 months postpartum with my first son, and he was about to go into open heart surgery, and I was full-time pumping and I hadn't gone back to work yet, and I was just feeling really overwhelmed about having to go back to work soon, and you know, sending my son in for open heart surgery and being a mom of a child with special needs. And I had let all of my basic needs go at that point, and I was dealing with extreme like postpartum anxiety. I was exhausted, and my husband was shocked, and he's like, "Okay, we need to do something about this because you can't keep living like this." And that was the moment where I realized, okay, I'm going to take control of the things I can control. I'm going to nourish myself. I'm going to go for walks. I'm going to work out. I'm really going to focus on my health. And once I did that, like everything changed. Everything got so much easier.
Well, thank you, Brooke. There are so many things to unpack in there that I would love to dig into. So let's start first with just, being postpartum and having a newborn in general. Like that's just like
Mhm.
take that chunk of it. Cause I think for so many moms, that is a difficult place because you're so focused, like, I must keep this child alive. Like this is my job is to keep this baby alive. And so
Mhm.
that's where a lot of your self-worth can go out the window because you're like, I don't have to think about me. I'm an adult. I can handle it. And how can you just talk a little bit more about that stretch in that period?
Yeah. I mean, it's an adjustment, especially for your first child, because you don't know what normal is anymore. Like all of a sudden, you can't do things on your own time anymore. Like there's other people to consider and there's other people's needs who are important, like people that you haven't had to take care of in the past. And so there for sure is an adjustment period where you do have to become a little bit more aware of other people's needs, and you do have to take care of somebody else, and it is your full responsibility to do that. But at the same time, just because it's your responsibility to take care of somebody else, it doesn't mean that that also is an excuse for, you to just let your needs go. Because what ends up happening is when we start to let our needs go, like our basic needs, like resting or eating, like that is the probably the first thing I see moms do is I'm too busy to eat. I'm too busy to eat, and or I don't have time to cook, or I don't have time to eat, feed myself. I have to pump or I have to do this. And what they don't realize is actually when they're undernourished and underfed, that's making exhaustion worse. That's making swings worse. It's making postpartum anxiety worse. And so they actually set themselves up to be stuck in the cycle when they're not fueling their body effectively. And so I think, especially in this first few months postpartum, your body is healing. It's healing from labor. If you went through a C-section, it's healing from surgery. And so a lot of people don't realize that their body needs rest and nourishment during this time in order to function at its best. And I think a lot of moms, some moms just feel like I just want to get back to normal and I just want to go back to my old life, and then there's almost like the sadness that your life is not the same as it once was. And so there's a lot of emotions that play into this period of I'm grieving the life that I had, but I still love what I have now, and my body feels foreign and I don't recognize it, and I mentally my hormones feel all over the place. And so yeah, I think the first few months postpartum, especially their first, is just like such an adjustment, and it is really figuring out what is working to take care of yourself and what's not, and what's serving you in this season of life may not be serving you in a year from now, and that's okay to adjust it, later on.
Well, I always think of it, it seems like such an era of life that is so it changes so quickly, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what I've experienced with my own friends with babies. Like there's a time, like you just have to constantly adjust. And I think that can be hard because you're probably also sleep deprived
Yeah.
and you're taking care of a newborn and there's all these complexities.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious for you too, because you have a special needs child. Like how did it come in for you? Like this probably that self-sacrificing thing might have been even higher for you. Like if would
Yeah.
you mind digging into that a little bit or
Yeah, for
sharing from
sure.
there? Yeah.
I felt like just especially having my first son have special needs, it was all of a sudden, I was now a therapist. Like I had to do the speech therapy and OT and PT, and like I had to do all the therapies that the therapists were telling me to do. And I was an exclusive pumper, and that's not something I necessarily wanted for my breastfeeding journey initially. And so now I was tied to a pump all day, and that's not something I necessarily envisioned. And I was taking him, to tons of doctor's appointments and yeah, a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of surgeries that first year. And so, yeah, it wasn't, I will say, like, it was a very different experience than like what a lot of people experience. And I felt like I grieved it in a different way where I was jealous of other people because I was like, oh, you are so lucky. Like, your baby just breastfeeds. Your baby doesn't have to go through open heart surgery. Your baby doesn't have to go through all of these appointments. And so there was definitely a period of like jealousy towards others. Um, and definitely there was a lot of guilt initially when I wanted to eat alone or I wanted to work out or I wanted to do something by myself. I felt like a failure because his needs were so extensive compared to other kids. And so that was definitely something I felt really strongly initially. And when I hit that breaking point with my husband, he's like, why are you trying to do this all? Like, why are you trying to be this? You're trying to go back to work and be this all-star like clinical dietitian. You're trying to go back to work and also be like a perfect mom. And also at this time, I was starting two businesses. And so not only was I working full time as a 40-hour a week employee, I was starting two businesses. I had a child under one with special needs. Like, so I was putting so much on my plate and I didn't want to ask for help because I felt like a failure. I felt like I wasn't a good mom if I was asking for help. And when I finally like swallowed that and realized, hey, I'm actually a really good mom for asking for help and needing support and delegating and taking care of myself and knowing my boundaries and knowing what's good for my mental and physical health, like that really drastically changed things in my marriage and how I showed up at work and really all aspects of life.
That's so powerful and such a big journey. I feel like you're sharing with us that must have been like a day by day. Like there are moments where you're like, okay, today is a day. Like I have to pick myself back up and put
Mhm.
myself first and like give myself a good meal or get myself a little bit of a sleep, whatever it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah, and like every season of life was a little different. So, the first month was really about I'm just going to rest as much as I can and nourish and nourish and nourish and pump and pump and pump. And like, that was my core goal the first few months. And then once we got past that hump and he eventually learned how to breastfeed after his open heart surgery and we were healing, he was healing from surgery, then it was like, okay, I'm going to really focus on getting outside every day and walking and my activity level. And so I think as moms, especially, we want to do it all right away. We want to, be the perfect mom and be all of these things. And I think what some of us need to realize is that it's like baby steps is what's going to get you there. And so it's okay to just say, this month I'm going to focus on just this one piece. And then in a month or two from now, I'm going to focus on adding in these other pieces. And that's okay too. You're less likely to burn out when you slowly and sustainably add in habits versus trying to do everything at once and having this all or nothing mentality, which is something a lot of moms have struggled with before becoming a mom.
Yeah. Well, one thing you also mentioned too is like you learn to ask for help during that time. And I feel like this is just like a general,
Mhm.
many women are just like trained to not ask for help. Like, I'm going to do it on my own. I'm going to just figure this out. And I know that that's something I struggled with for a long time too. And how did you, like, were you someone who was good at asking for help before you had a baby, your first
No,
baby?
not really. No, I had this tendency where I wanted to be the best at everything and I wanted to do it on my own. And I was a hard worker and, I earned the things that I got. And so I kind of like wore that as a badge of honor. Like, oh, I'm doing more. I'm busy. I'm accomplishing these things and I'm putting more hard work in. And so I like wore that as a badge of honor. And so I was not used to asking for help because truthfully, I was always like so high functioning in life that I didn't necessarily need help in a lot of areas of life. I mean, there were some college classes where I was struggling and I remember like feeling so shameful asking some of my friends for help. Like I just remember being in the library and one of my friends was just naturally amazing at anat and phys and organic chemistry and I was like, I need your help. I need you to help me study because for some reason, like some of this is not working in my brain. And, once I did ask for help in like that situation, it was like, oh, okay, this is actually really beneficial. And so I definitely have always had a hard time in life, like asking for help. But once I did it, it was like, oh my gosh, why haven't I been doing this sooner throughout life? Because your entire life will be so much easier if you are willing to let go of control of certain things. And that was really difficult for me.
Well, can you remember like one of the earliest things? I mean, because you obviously clearly had to ask for help from your husband, but then
Mhm.
also like bigger levels of help. Like when do you remember like a distinct moment where you're like, okay, Brooke, like it's time to ask for help or to get the help that you need?
Yeah, I mean, it's like going to therapy has been something where I like hit breaking points and was like, "Oh yeah, I think I need to go talk to a therapist." And then my husband's like, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." And so there were like aspects when I had that breakdown a few months postpartum with my first, I was like, I think I need to go talk to a therapist about this anxiety. And he's like, yeah, I think so. Like, I'm not equipped to help you in that way. And then after my first son, my husband and I had 5 miscarriages. And so the most recent one being a few months ago. And so at that point, as we were going through that this fall, I was like, I think I need to start going to a therapist again. And he's like, yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And it's been so beneficial, so helpful. And like I reached out to a recurrent miscarriage support group and they've been really beneficial. And when I got the Down syndrome diagnosis and the heart defect diagnosis with my first son, my husband and I joined support groups right away, and I was able to meet and connect with so many moms, so many families. And like that alone was huge for my husband and I to meet families while we were pregnant and then while we were postpartum who were going through a similar journey. And it just made the journey way easier. And so I definitely have examples now where asking for help and seeking support, and the asking for help may just mean getting in a community of like-minded women or moms or people who have the same goals as you or the same struggles as you, and just talking about it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to outsource everything. So there's
Mhm.
different aspects of getting support and asking for help.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that because I think there's a lot of I like the specificity of help because there's just so many different ways that we actually need it in life and especially obviously in that postpartum journey. And
Mhm.
then I'm curious for you too, like when you self-worth, like how it showed up after your second child and
Mhm.
you were now confronted with the same things because now you're busier, right? You have two
Mhm.
kids and you're trying to nourish yourself and go through this journey.
I think it was a lot easier the second time around because I looked back on that first experience and realized, hey, when I'm nourishing my body, when I'm working out, when I'm, taking care of my mental health, when I'm taking time for myself, when I'm spending time with friends and family, that allows me to show up much better as a mom, as a friend, as a coworker. And so really that was never a problem with my second. It was immediately when I had him, it was like, of course, his needs are important, but my needs are too. Like, my needs are just as important as his. And, if he's nursing, like a lot of times I'll grab a snack and eat above him because I deserve to eat too. And so I think, yeah, initially, like when I had my first, it was definitely an adjustment period, but my second, it was very much right away. I knew like, yeah, I'm worthy of asking for help. I'm worthy of support. I'm worthy of getting all of these things because my body just went through all of this to grow and feed a human. And I also deserve, rest and nourishment and to be taken care of in this moment too.
Mm. Yeah, so powerful. I'm so glad to hear that because now you're like, I can just put this into action. Where do you find that women tend to really struggle with putting it into action during that period, the postpartum period?
I think the biggest barrier for a lot of moms is the feeling of guilt of like, I'm not worthy of the help, or I'm a bad mom if I ask for help, or I'm a bad mom if I can't do it all myself. I think that's probably like the biggest emotion and barrier. And, it's always like asking yourself that question, like, would a bad mom actually ask for help? Like, no. Like, if you saw your best friend and she was struggling and she said, hey, I really need help in this area of life, would you like think she was a bad mom? And the answer is always, well, no, of course not. And so, I think we really need to take a step back when those thoughts of guilt or shame or you're a bad mom or these lies that come in our head, and really evaluating them and seeing if they're truths. And I think then we realize like, oh, hey, these are just negative thoughts. They're not actually what's true.
Mm. Well, as you said that, you reminded me of this. It's from some Brene Brown talk from I don't know
Mhm.
whenever that came out, but she actually says that people trust people who ask for help way more than
Mm.
people who don't. So if you don't ask for help, and if you go into like that hyper perfectionist mode, I can do everything. People actually
Mhm.
don't trust those people. They're like they never
Yeah.
ask for help. Like they're not like me. They're not a human who like requires support. But then when we actually ask for it, people are much more inclined to trust you in life.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I can
Yeah.
see that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and so then what would you say to like on that worthiness journey around being a mom and then nourishing yourself and supporting yourself? What is it like for moms that you would say to them to like really help them start to get that on a different level? Because I think it's something where I find a lot of people can recognize it, but then
Mhm.
internalizing it is hard. Like actually acting upon it is challenging. And what do you do to support moms with that piece of it?
Yeah, like I said, I think just taking initial baby steps and seeing how their body responds and how they respond. So if there's a mom I'm working with and she's just like, I'm too busy to feed myself, but she's exhausted and moody and crabby and she's worried about her milk supply and like all these things are popping up. And I say, hey, like let's just try this out. Let's just try to eat consistently. Let's try a few simple things and see how your body responds. And then, after a week, it's like, oh, my energy's better and my mood is better. And like all of a sudden it's this domino effect of, oh my gosh, this one little change actually made a huge impact on how I'm showing up for my family. And so then it's a lot easier to stick with a habit when you can see the results like so quickly. And I think something else that a lot of moms struggle with postpartum is, like, oh, I want to get my body back, or I want to lose a baby weight, or I feel uncomfortable in my body. And so therefore I don't deserve to eat. And it's like,
Mm.
hey, you deserve to eat always, regardless of your body size, regardless of what you look like. And actually dieting and restricting and eating really scarce actually harms your hormones. It harms your metabolism. It makes these symptoms worse, and it can even lead to long-term weight gain. And so I think a lot of moms have negative beliefs in their head. If I eat this, then this will happen, or I'm not worthy of eating this. And those thoughts and beliefs actually drive their behaviors, but they drive them in a negative way. And so really like peeling back those thoughts and beliefs and challenging people, like, are those true? And what if we test this out and see how your body responds and make adjustments? And that works really well for people, because when you put something into practice and immediately you start feeling better, it's just so much easier to stick with it.
Yeah, so it's like actually just having that first time where you're like, "Oh, I saw an outcome and like that actually worked way better for me
Mhm.
than I ever thought
Mhm. Yeah,
possible."
exactly.
Yeah. And then what would you say too, like, do you find also for a lot of women, like it's like old worthy things, like I'm not enough coming up in the journey of like being a new mom?
Yeah, and I think something I've talked to a lot of friends about too is I think trauma starts coming up once we become moms. Like,
Mm,
it's a lot of, I don't want to repeat what I saw growing up, or I don't want to,
mm.
make the same mistakes my parents did. And of course, like, it's no fault to our parents. They were all doing the best that they could in that moment. But, I think every parent makes mistakes. Every parent does something wrong. And so I think when we place expectations on ourselves that we have to be this perfect parent and we can never screw up, that's already just setting us up for failure, because we will make mistakes. We will do the best we can and we will still screw up. And so really coming to acceptance of that and realizing that as we become parents, some things might come up, some trauma may come up, some thoughts and patterns may come up, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize it, but the reason I am treating my child like this, or the reason I am doing this, is because I saw my mom or dad doing this." And so I do think it brings out it uncovers a lot of things that you don't necessarily realize are inside and internal until you have kids and become a parent and have to parent another child and keep them alive.
Yeah, I can only imagine, right? Because now you're bringing up all this old stuff for people. And is that something then you have to work with a lot of like that's a lot of the reason women don't always take care of themselves either is because of that trauma that's coming up.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is a lot of like, again, I think those feelings of like, I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy of seeking help, or I'm not worthy of taking care of myself. And yeah, it just gets us stuck in the cycle over and over of, oh, that's not what I saw my parents do, or I'm not worthy. And it just tends to keep us stuck from really feeling our best mentally and physically. And so, a lot of what we have to do is, yes, we have to do the physical things. We have to get sleep. We have to manage our stress. We have to exercise. We have to eat. There are things that we need to do to feel our best mentally and physically. But if we're just focusing on what to do and the actions, and we're not focused on the beliefs and thoughts that are going on in our brain, we're not going to get the complete results that we want. And so that is something that I work with moms on, is like really retraining your brain so that you can start to pull out these thoughts and beliefs and have awareness with them and start to reframe them and change them. That way, moving forward, your beliefs will change your behaviors in the future.
Mm, yeah, that is such powerful work and such deep work. I feel like that a lot of women don't realize like that worthiness piece is really like the thoughts and the beliefs that are going on in the
Hmm.
background all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wanna switch tacks a little bit because I feel like this must come up for so many of the women you work with, and just I'm curious about your own journey about asking for help from your husband and, like, that relationship and the way it changes once you have the baby because the baby's so physically dependent on you.
Hmm.
Were you able how were you able to navigate that for yourself to feel worthy enough to be like, "Wow, like, I really need him to do things instead of me
Hmm.
doing everything?"
Yeah, it was slowly like passing things off to him that I knew didn't have to be me. So like if I'm nursing my son, like, yeah, he can't do that. But while I was pumping full time, I said, hey, can you wash the pump parts? Can you put the milk in the freezer? Can you change a diaper? Can you, pick him up? Can you do these things? And so there are some things like we can't necessarily outsource, but there are a lot that we can. And like dads can still do skin to skin. Dads can still hold the baby. They can cuddle. They can still feed the baby. They can do a lot of things. And so it's really about, deciding what are the things that you want to outsource and what are the things that you don't. Now, my second son never took a bottle. We tried everything and he just never took a bottle. And so that was something that we couldn't outsource. Once he turned 6 months, we got him on a straw cup and then he could at least drink pumped milk out of there. But that is not something he ever wanted to do and was super stubborn. And so, for him, it's like there is still this one thing that I can't outsource to my husband. And, it does suck when I'm gone and my husband's like, oh man, like you're gone. And he like really wants to nurse. And so it is a bummer that there are some things that we can't outsource, but it's also something I enjoy. And so I wouldn't necessarily want to outsource that either because it's a nice, relaxing bonding experience. And so, yeah, I think, my husband obviously knew when I said I wanted to go to therapy, he knew he couldn't help me with that. He's like, go find a therapist. Good luck. I support you, but like, I can't be a therapist for you. So, I think also placing expectations on our friends and family that are realistic because we can't expect our friends or family to become our therapist. We can't expect our friends or family to do certain things for us. And so also having reasonable expectations of what are things that you can delegate and you can ask for help with and what are some things that we can't. And even like it was kind of an argument between my husband and I recently. I said, I think we need to hire somebody to come in and just deep clean our house once or twice a month because it's not happening. I'm working full time. I'm working and I have my one son full time at home. I have my other son half time. And I was like, some of these things just aren't getting done. And it's causing stress in my life. And I want this done. And so, it was a conversation of, okay, what can we move around so that we can get it done? And because it was like, hey, unless you're willing to spend, 5 hours on a Saturday cleaning, then we're gonna outsource this. And he's like, okay, I can see where you're at, and so sometimes is those difficult conversations of like, what are we going to pay to outsource? What can you do? What am I willing to do? And how can we like find a compromise that works for everybody in the family? Like my husband loves to cook. So he does a majority of the cooking. I do a lot of the grocery pickups. I do a majority of the cleaning. And so we've just found like what roles we both like and which roles we're good at. And it works out that it tends to not overlap at all, which is really convenient.
Yeah, because I find sometimes I think that's the challenge is even if you have a relationship where you didn't ask for help a lot at the beginning and then now you're like, okay, like I need your help all the time. And now we have
Mm-hmm.
to really get into that balanced place.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, I think when you add more kids to the family, then it's like he took on a lot more responsibilities with our oldest son once our second son was born. It was like, hey, I really need you to do some of this stuff because, I'm sitting here with the baby and I can't get up, And so it definitely adjustments like as you add to your family too.
Yeah, I bet that's changed. I know. And then for you, even more next round, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Amazing. Well, what would you say, like, how could you say about your, like, looking back at for yourself, your own self-worth journey from before you had the baby, for your first baby to the place where you are now around taking care of yourself, nourishing? I mean, you're expecting your third, like, there's a lot more coming still, even for you.
hmm
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think, I actually worked a lot on healing my body image and, my relationship with food and body and all of these things in personal development. Like I started that way before I had kids. And so I think that was an advantage I had because it was an easy thing for me to recognize early on. Like when I broke down to him, I was like, I need help and this is what I need to do. But I think a lot of moms aren't aware of that because they haven't done that work first. And so
Mm.
I do think like the quicker you can do this work before you have kids, that's always the most ideal time because it's just going to be easier. And so really like in my case again, it's like healing your relationship with food and body and really getting to this place where like your health your health is important and you deserve to take care of your health. And when you take care of your health, your mental health and physical health, again, you can show up better at work, you can show up better for friends, your family, your spouse, whoever is around you. And so I think I hit that realization very early on in my life, like before I had kids, before I was married. And so I do think it did make the journey easier. So I would say definitely do it as fast as you can and know that it's a journey and it changes. And I think something I always like to say is as long as you're living in a body, like you have a relationship with this body and it's going to take work. And I think if we ignored our marriage, if we ignored our partner, like it's probably not going to go well. And so it's the same thing with our body. And, if we talk to our bodies negatively, if we don't fuel or nourish ourselves, if we overexercise or just don't move our body at all, like our body is not going to physically feel good. And it is a relationship that deserves nurturing, because your body is the longest relationship you're ever going to have. It's going to be longer than the relationship you have with your spouse or your kids. And so I think that's always also something to keep in mind is it's a journey that you're going to be on for the rest of your life, and it will take some work and awareness, and that's okay. And it's not always going to be easy, but you can see what's working and what's not and where you need adjustments and kind of go from there. And it's not going to be perfect.
Well, what you're saying is really powerful because I think especially when I was younger, I used to always think, well, at some point, it won't matter anymore. I'll be totally fine. I'll never have to work on it again. And then,
Yeah.
the longer you go in life and the more you work on yourself, you're like, oh, wow, like there's always new
There's always.
layers. There's always
Uh-huh.
something to uncover around you get older. Like, how do you feel about your body when you age or you have a baby or whatever, all
Mhm.
those pieces, right? And then being confronted with that. But I also actually personally am like, that's just always the opportunity. As soon as
Mhm.
something comes up and there's a challenge, you're like, okay, here's
Mhm.
the opportunity to like look within, see all the stuff that's coming up that's
Yeah.
making me feel that way.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, what a powerful conversation. So let's go. Okay, Grace, they'll edit that out.
Oh, you're good. I have a dog upstairs, but he's sleeping.
I'm just waiting her out because she's being very loud.
Oh, you're good. I'll drink my water now.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're good. So Brooke, let's do your rapid fire questions. Oh my goodness, Coco. There must be the mail. Must be the mailman.
UPS.
We're pausing. Okay, I think she said. Okay, Brooke. So let's do your rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right. What was the last thing you watched on TV?
Last night I watched Impractical Jokers.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Awesome. And then the next question, what is on your nightstand?
All my vitamins and supplements, a baby monitor, my phone charger, my lamp. I think that's it. Yeah, there's a lot of vitamins and supplements on there right now.
Nightstands, for some reason, tell us a lot about what's going on in somebody's life.
Yes. Yes,
So
a
yeah.
lot of hair ties and hair clips, yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. And then the next one is, when was the last time you tried something new and what was it?
Ooh, try something new. That's fun. I feel like I'm always trying something new. Like, I feel like I'm pretty adventurous with food. I mean, I think the most fun thing that I did that was new, I went skydiving. This was like pre-kids, but
Oh, wow.
wasn't super, super recent. But that was like the most exciting thing that I did. That was something that was on my bucket list for so, so, so long. And then I finally did it, and it was so much fun. And I want to do it again.
Like when you were in the plane ready to jump, were you like, I can't believe I'm doing this? Or do you have like someone strapped to you so they just jump so
Somebody
you have
was
no choice?
strapped. Yes. I would not have done it by myself. I was like, he does this all the time. He's good. And he was like very confident and, excited about it. I actually had like so much peace up there. I went with one of my guy friends and he was a little nervous and he had done it before. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not nervous at all. This is going to be great. And I don't know, it was very weird how calm I was. And I loved it. It was so fun, and I don't know, it was a really cool experience.
That's awesome. I feel like I would not be calm. I would be like, oh my God, I'm jumping out of a plane.
Yeah. My husband thought I was nuts. He's like, I will not be doing that with you.
Amazing. Okay, awesome. All right. And then last one is, what are your top 3 most used emojis on your phone?
A purple heart. Why purple? I don't know. It just became my heart color. I didn't like that everybody used red, and I wanted to be different. So that one. I think the LOL, like the crying face, the
Mhm.
laughing crying one, and then probably the actual like crying one.
The actual cry. I know I use that one a lot.
Yes.
I was always like, why do I use this one so much? But sometimes you
Yeah, I
just
was
feel like
like,
you need
I
to
could
do it.
look and see if there's anything else, but I feel like those are the top ones. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Brooke, thank you for such a rich conversation and an important conversation especially for new moms around, self-worth and really supporting themselves during that time. So what is the best way for people to reach you?
On Instagram. So you can find me at nutrition.for.mamas.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yes.
I follow her. She's got lots of interesting things on there all the time. So, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke, for being on School of Self-Worth. I'm so grateful to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.